Hey, it's Huck. Did you miss me? Yeah, I missed you too. I guess I should start here by saying that I don't generally get a whole lot of sleep. I mean, I'm lucky if I can grab maybe, 4 hours of shut-eye when I get home after working all night before I have to get up and take care of Mom and do what I have to do. And I generally try to catch up on my days off. But last week, those days off just happened to be Thursday and Friday, and like a lot of you, I reckon, I got absolutely no sleep whatsoever during those 48 hours as I was glued to the television coverage of the hunt for the 2 terrorist suspects, in that sleepy little village of Watertown, Massachusetts, just outside of Boston. And like just about everyone else, I breathed a big sigh of relief late Friday when not only did they find the second suspect just blocks from the scene of a shootout the night before that had allegedly killed suspect number 1, but they also managed to capture suspect 2 alive. Among thoughts that come to mind now that the dust is settled is how fortunate we are that these 2 guys, like so many of the other young people who seek to do America harm in the name of Allah, were working with only half a brain. I mean, come on. Not only did these 2 guys not seem to realize they were being photographed and video recorded by hundreds of iPhones and surveillance cameras all around them, yet they made no attempt to even disguise themselves. But they nonchalantly returned home like a mile and a half away from the blast scene, apparently plotting to do more damage instead of fleeing while they still had a chance. But then anyone with any real intelligence would have to, first question the methods they were using, to follow through on their cause to begin with. I mean, doesn't common sense suggest to you that you have to be a little bit nuts to be devoted to a God who you think rewards the senseless murder of innocents? I think Cleveland rock legend Michael Stanley might have just said it best in one of the great live concert songs ever recorded. They're in the lyrics to a song called Let's Get the Show on the Road, and I believe the lyrics go something like, "The Lord uses the good ones, and the bad ones use the Lord." Lord, Allah, whatever deity you happen to want to fill in that blank with, anyone walking around believing that their God wishes them to do harm to as many innocent children and adults as possible are just wrong on the merits from the get-go. Case closed. It's why I still have problems defending Palestinians, or at least those Palestinians who in their struggle with the apartheid system run by Israel continue to use children to surround their weapon sites, which they know are going to be targeted, and then recruit children and teenagers to carry out their suicide bomb attacks. Usually not on military or even political targets, but on innocent men, women, and children. I'm sorry, but the Palestinian cause loses all credibility once they, resign themselves to those tactics. I mean, have these folks never ever heard of Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr.? And haven't they learned of the success of using methods like civil disobedience and passive resistance? Anyway, after reading the comments on Huffington Post these last few days, already the conspiracy nuts are out in force, questioning the evidence behind naming these 2 guys as suspects in the Boston Marathon bombings. Now, the 2 suspects, 2 brothers, Tamarlan and Jura Zanarev, apparently immigrated with their family to America, some 10 years ago, from a region of Russia known as Chechnya. And as most of us know, this has a long history of a bloody struggle for independence, this region of Chechnya. But more recently, it's been an area which has been ripe for jihad recruitment by Al-Qaeda-like Islamic extremists. Now, I don't really have a problem with folks, wanting to look at the evidence that ties these two young men to the crimes they're accused of committing. After all, it's our right. In fact, it's our duty to question authority. And let's face it, there are some unanswered questions that need to be addressed. Like, how many guns were involved? And who was using them when and where? That's why I'm glad they're planning to try this Jura in our federal courts, and not some military tribunal where a trial could be delayed indefinitely. And facts in the case might as well be hermetically sealed for all we'll ever hear of them. But the truth is, I don't really mistrust our government so much that I doubt that they got the real people behind the Boston Marathon bombings. While I await the evidence, like everyone else, those folks suggesting that this was all a setup, that these two young men were framed, that it's some sort of cover-up or some other Machiavellian government plot, well, I'm sorry, but these seem to be the same folks who think a lot of crazy things. Like Obama being a secret Muslim, to 9/11 being a government conspiracy, or, I don't know, Jay-Z being the head of the Illuminati and dictating world affairs in between investments of hip-hop, fashions, and sports franchises. But I do have a few questions for authorities, and forgive me, but I really would like some answers to them. One, if government is monitoring virtually all communications, including online activity these days, shouldn't someone have noticed when one of these young men went back to Chechnya, then came back and within a month started posting, pro-jihadist videos on his YouTube channel? How did we miss that? I mean, even after they had pictures of these guys, they had no idea who they were or where they were from until they publicly released the photos and the information started pouring in. Two, apparently authorities have no idea where the older brother went or who he had contact with upon his return to Russia more than a year ago, and he was there for like 6 months. Isn't this a sign that, maybe having our CIA so involved in drone strikes around the world, instead of, in the hands of military personnel, that it's keeping our spy agency from gathering the kind of important information and infiltrating, enough jihadist movements around the world to help us catch these homegrown terrorists before they strike? 3, it's estimated that the overwhelming force called out to find, kill, or capture these two guys, combined with a virtual shutdown of the greater Boston metro area for about 24 hours, exceeded an economic cost of more than $330 million. 2 guys with a few homemade explosive devices and other weapons that probably cost less than a really cheap used car. On top of the billions we've spent on homeland security since 9/11, including hundreds of thousands of new government workers with security clearances, all because a few dozen guys armed with box cutters, hydrogen peroxide soda bottles, and other homemade explosives. Am I out of line, or is there a cheaper, more effective way to screen for terror suspects? I mean, I'd love to hear what you think. Leave your comments and tell me what you would do differently. I mean, personally, I don't know what I would do differently. It took only 5 days to identify those who appear to be responsible for this tragedy, unless there's more to this story that we haven't heard. And while the authorities deserve a lot of the credit, we should not forget the very important role average citizens played in all this. From, tending to the bombing victims in the immediate aftermath of this tragedy, to ultimately discovering the hiding place of the remaining suspect just 1 block outside the perimeter that law enforcement had set up. And what's up with that? I mean, really, 10,000 agents, police, National Guard, and who knows what else, and they failed to check a The inside of a trailered boat just 1 block away? Anyway, 5 days is pretty impressive by any standard. It does make you wonder, though. What if these two guys had planned a better escape instead of waiting around? What if they had disguised themselves when leaving those bombs? Authorities are going to have to study this and learn from it, but unfortunately I suppose they won't be the only ones learning from it. So we're going to have to be even better when and if there's a next time. I'm Huck. Thanks for watching. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this.